Tucked away in downtown Peterborough, there's a hidden gem where history comes to life. The Phoenix Mill House at the Monadnock Center for History and Culture has seen many seasons since its days as a mill workers' home in the 19th century. Today, a team of volunteer interpreters share how the Prescott family lived in the mill house in the 1830s. From cooking to daily chores and handcrafts, the team has researched and experimented to learn how a working family lived nearly 200 years ago. It's December and Christmas is coming. John as mill overseer Samuel Prescott, Lorraine as his wife Nancy, and children Augustus and Georgiana, played by Brigham and Catherine, are busy decorating the house and preparing food and gifts for the big day. This is Christmas in the Mill House.
You think we're gonna have enough wood for tonight?
Well, I hope so. We're going to need maybe 10 cords for this year, if we can pay for it.
Yeah.
As you know, my work is dependent on the weather and when the river freezes and when the mill shuts down. So this time of year is one of promise, but also one of question.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we've got these beautiful greens here, and we're making a wreath. Bringing in greenery into a house at this time of year is really important. You know what's coming ahead is some really dark, cold months, and seeing some greenery just really helps.
Now, did the Prescotts have a Christmas tree in their house?
Well, I don't think they probably did. Some people did in the United States. It depended on what part of the country you lived in and what your background was, what country you came from. So like in Pennsylvania, where there are a lot of Germans, they might have had Christmas trees before people in New England did. When Queen Victoria marries Prince Albert, he's German, and so he brings a lot of these customs that we celebrate still today. He's the one who's kind of responsible for it. And in 1846, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert decided to create like a Christmas card with a Christmas tree on a table. And that spread like crazy and was reprinted in the United States, so that for some people that might have been their first introduction to a Christmas tree, but it caught on quickly after that. So by 1900, about 1 in 5 families had Christmas trees.
Now, did they believe in Santa Claus?
Well, that's a good one too. Another area of the United States that they really started celebrating Christmas early was in New York. They used to celebrate different traditions with St. Nicholas. But probably one of the biggest things that determine what's happening now is in New York, the Reverend Clement Moore decided to write a story for his children. Mm-hmm. And it was a visit by St. Nicholas. But in that poem that he wrote for his story and later got published was talk of Santa Claus and 8 reindeer. So there you go. That's when the reindeer got started too. Now the wreath is looking good.
Yes, it is.
The Prescotts wouldn't have spent a lot of time celebrating Christmas, but we know people in this area did. For one thing, we've got a diary of Dr. Kendall Osgood from the late 1700s, and he talks about he and Mrs. Osgood, he always refers to her as Mrs. Osgood in his diary, he and Mrs. Osgood kept Christmas. And that was actually a typical way of saying something about you recognize the day. So they kept Christmas. But one of the things, because they would at least maybe do a special pie, and one pie that was very popular was mincemeat pie. Mincemeat is a very interesting pie because it's not the mincemeat that we have today. But definitely Nancy would have some kind of a booklet or something that was recipes that she got from her mother, her aunts, friends, and she's written all of them down, but they would call them receipts. So this is Nancy's book of receipts. So the mincemeat pie is an old pie. I mean, this has been around forever, but the ingredients changed drastically. So the original mincemeat would use some cider. It would definitely use the spices, the cinnamon, the nutmeg. It would use raisins. She says to use just a small amount of white sugar and a small amount of brown sugar. These items are expensive, so you cut down on those. The bulk of my pie is going to be made up of cooked beef and some suet. And the suet is the fat of the cow. As the time changes, what happens is the amount of beef that you're using, the savory part of this pie, goes down. And the sweet part of the pie goes up. And it's just a matter of economy. These sugars are going to keep getting less expensive. The dried fruit are going to become less expensive, and the meat's going to become probably more expensive. The one thing that doesn't change, though, is if you go to the market today and buy some mincemeat in a nice jar, it's got chopped up suet in it. So this remains right from the beginning. And the other ingredients are there, the apples, the raisins, the sugars, the cider, but it's just that they change the volume. More meat and suet, no meat and suet. And that would be the mincemeat pie.
You know, I'd really love to know what the Prescotts did actually on Christmas Day, how they spent it.
Did they hang stockings for Christmas time?
Well, I think the hanging of stockings was really a Germanic and Dutch tradition from New York City and the mid-Atlantic states. Although a poem published in 1822 by Clement Moore, A Night Before Christmas, popularized the notion of hanging stockings, so it's likely the Prescott children had heard of that.
Now, did they give each other gifts?
Well, gift giving was actually, I think, more common for New Year's Day back then. But gradually that changes and the gifts do start happening, on Christmas. So maybe.
But I think the Prescott gifts would have been very simple and practical. Maybe an orange is a very special treat, more likely an article of clothing made by Mrs. Prescott, a book perhaps. Nothing lavish.